Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the junkyard crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with a 1966 Buick LeSaber convertible. Now, in 1966, Buick was doing pretty well. They were in 6th place. They sold 580,000 cars and were ranked behind Oldsmobile, Pontiac, Plymouth, Chevy, and Ford. And roughly 25% of those 580,000 cars were LeSabers, which could be had as 2-doors, 4-doors, convertibles, but not station wagons. But with that said, of the 147,399 LeSabers built, only 4,994 were convertibles like this. It's a pretty rare car. Now, the interesting thing about the LeSaber, this is a full-size car on the same 123-inch wheelbase as an Electra or a larger, more expensive Buick, but this was Buick's inexpensive full-size offering. But we can see it has a steel or an aluminum, or sorry, a die-cast metal grille. It's almost a musical instrument. But here's the LeSaber name. But the weird thing about the LeSaber was its engine. While the full-size Buicks could still be had with a 401 or a 425 cubic inch nailhead V8, LeSabers came with a 340 cubic inch, not a nailhead. This is actually a second generation Buick V8. Again, not related to the nailhead and really much anyway. These actually were smaller engines in almost every way. These had a 4.24-inch bore spacing, the space between each bore. On the 215, the 300, the 340, and the 350, the small block Buick engine was actually smaller than the 4.75-inch bore spacing of the 400, 430, and 455. So the heads, the intakes, nothing interchanges, but that's not a nail head. With that said, this one has a 4-barrel carburetor. We'll get to that in a second. It's a Carter AFB. This would have been standard with a 2-barrel. And the transmission on this, that is an automatic right there. You can see that it's aluminum, but that is a 2-speed Buick Super Turbine 300, not to be confused with the 2-speed Chevrolet Power Glide automatic. In fact, if you got like a Pontiac GTO or an Olds 442 or a Buick GS 400 midsize car with an automatic, that's the transmission you got in 1965 and 66. The Turbo 400 3-speed wouldn't be available till 67. So again, that's not a Power Glide. It is a 2-speed. It is an automatic, but that's a Super Turbine 300. Now, something else seen on LeSabers, it's a little bit weird, is massive front drum brakes. We see them here. No disc brakes in 66, but that's a big old drum. But it's not aluminum. Well, what about Buick's aluminum fin drums? Not on LeSaber. Couldn't even get them. The aluminum drums were strictly reserved for Rivieras and the Electras and the more expensive full-size models. This is a full-line catalog for the 66 Buicks right here. And we can see here on the front, kind of cool, shows all the goodies, the chrome wheel, the tilt wheel, the steering wheel, all these good things. And here on the page for the LeSaber, we see right there, LeSaber tuned for extra value. And we can see again, the price on this thing new was $33.26, the most expensive LeSaber of any kind. And again, only 4,994 were convertibles. Now there's the engine right there. See, it says 220 horse Wildcat 350. Well, it was actually 350 foot-pounds. It was a 340 cubic inch engine. And Buick again was in the habit of advertising torque, not cubes or horsepower at this point in time. You can see here finned alloy iron brake drums, front and rear, no aluminum on LeSaber. And we go to the right-hand side, the 4-barrel carb I mentioned, there it is. The 260 horsepower, 375, which was 375 foot-pounds, 340 cubes. There it is right there. It's not a 350. $26.32 got you an extra 30 horse. I'll take it. And of course, super turbine transmission, $205 right there. And this doesn't necessarily have it, but the performance axle with positive traction diff, $47.37. An economy axle, no charge. Thanks, I'll skip that one. Heavy-duty suspension includes rear springs, $3.79. So we'll get to that heavy-duty suspension. That has to do with the frame. We'll get to that in a moment. But special order paint, you can see right here, any color you want, Cadillac, $84.20. You usually had to wait a little longer to have your car built when you got special order paint, but that was certainly possible. To find out what color this car was, we go to the cowl tag, and here we see H2, so sea foam green metallic is what this puppy was born as. And again, LeSaber, again, 1 in 4 Buicks in 1966 was a full-size LeSaber. So this was the one that kind of did the heavy lifting for Buick's full-size line. A lot of folks bought these things, very, very popular car. On this side here, we can see the iron drum is missing or been removed, and here are the inner workings of that drum brake. Here's the wheel cylinder at the top, two little pistons inside with push rods that would push the drums out, squeeze them against the drum and slow the hub and the wheel. You can see the studs have been cut off or broken off here, kind of weird, but there's the spindle nut right there with the bearing here. On display, coil spring for suspension, as most all GM cars had. Body on frame construction. You can see here the front half of the frame, presto changeo, rust having severed this thing somewhere along the line. And again, 4,995 convertible, so a pretty rare puppy. You know, here we can have the top right here. It is power operated, but this one has, again, column shifted, 2-speed automatic. This could have been had with a 3-speed manual if you were a cheapskate. But a full-size car, 126-inch wheelbase, probably 20% larger than a Buick Skylark convertible. So if you wanted a convertible with full-size room for your entire family, the full-size car is the one you wanted. The Special was a mid-size, again, 20% smaller generally speaking. But speaking back to that heavy-duty frame, this right here is the remains of the side frame rail on this thing. It's been sliced and diced, but notice how it's boxed. It's a box section frame. That is standard on convertibles. If this was a hardtop, that would have no wall here. It'd be a C section like that. But the convertibles have this heavy-duty frame. But if you wanted a heavy-duty frame under your hardtop, you could get it for that $3.50 upcharge. Kind of interesting. Few people realized, but it was a heck of a value. And this is a convertible. And again, unlike cheaper cars, the rear window is glass. Right there, not plastic. So the nice thing about that was that rearward visibility was not impaired by a fuzzy plastic crystallized backlight. And there's a zipper around it. You can actually unzip that window if you want to. A lot of work, most people leave them in place just like we see here. Here's the back of that frame coming back. And again, it's boxed all the way to the tail, to the rear bumper. This is boxed section right here. Again, if this is a hardtop, that would be open, a C-channel frame. In the trunk, okay, again, commodious is a word I like to use, and we can see here that rust has taken its toll, pierced through the floor. But again, the underside of the deck lid, we can see that seafoam green metallic still shining. WRSI 95.3 FM. I think that's Rhode Island, not sure. But again, here are coil springs right here inside. And these are the ones that go boing, boing, boing. It's hard to imagine a car weighing enough to bounce and bottom this thing out. But again, unlike Chrysler vehicles, which had leaf springs in the back, GM generally had coils. The beauty of a coil spring is how light it is. I mean, that's like light. A Chrysler leaf spring would be about 60 pounds. I'd be doing this right now. So GM kind of had something with their coil springs. Of course, Ford adopted this in 1965. And coils were kind of de rigueur, or de rigor mortis, if you will, on GM products pretty much from the 1940s right on through into the 70s and 80s when, of course, McPherson struts and stuff like that, independent rear suspension took over. Of course, the 57, the Chevys had leafs, but Buicks had coils way back into the 1940s. But again, this one here is pretty well shot, still has some good stuff, the plastic for the taillights. And again, LeSaber was not to be confused with the Electra 225, or certainly the Riviera, which was a 2-door personal luxury coupe. And this would have been sort of the full-sized, inexpensive Buick of the day. But again, as a convertible, only 4,900 of these things and change were built. Pretty rare bird. Again, with its boxed frame, we can learn a lot from this thing. But again, 1 in 4 Buicks was one of these things back in 1966, full size, that is, a LeSaber. And a 340 cubic engine up front, not being confused with the Mopar 340, which came on the scene in 1968. Whole different engine. But again, this one here has the 4-barrel, kind of cool. $24 or so extra to make a little more power. But no 401s, no 425s, not even optional in these things. You had to get those in the bigger cars. So the little 340 is all you could get in one of these things here in 1966. So if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Maggs YouTube channel. Give us a like and hit the bell so that you'll be aware of the next video, which is going to happen tomorrow morning. And if you like these videos, keep in mind we've got a library on the playlist of like 300 or 400 of these videos. You can watch them right now for free if you want. But until then, we'll see you tomorrow morning with more Junkyard Gold. I mean, crawl. You know what I mean.